So give a round of applause to Martin.
Thank you. All right. I want to just say, excuse me if I have a little bit of cough. I've gotten something. So I will drink a little bit of extra water. So this presentation, I will go through a little bit of theory, how I use that theory to talk with organizations, and some practical steps to show that the tools we can use today are not that difficult. But before we start, I was once at a lecture about different cultures and how different cultures, different people, how they talk and interact when it comes to meetings. And what I learned is that we from Sweden, we tend to go directly into the subject, directly into problem-solving mode, while in other cultures, it's more that you need to talk first, you need to get to know each other a little bit before you actually start discussing the problem. So, I just want to take a minute, share a little bit my story, and I will also use Lisa's tip from yesterday to have a minute to talk about my credentials and why I know what I'm talking about. So, I'm coming from a city called Västerås, not far from Stockholm. Born and raised, and when I left for studies in Gothenburg at Chalmers University of Technology. I started Master of Science in Electrotechnology, and I had a specialty in complex and adaptive systems. Turns out it's quite good to have read a little bit about chaos theory when you're working with software and software testing. It has been very useful. After the studies, there was still a little bit difficult to find jobs. This was a little bit after the IT bubble. Things are returning to normal, but still a little bit difficult to find jobs. So I was searching all over the place. I was hoping to find something that had like a small startup, something where one person actually mattered. And the only company that responded was Ericsson, Sweden's biggest company. But I went on a train, go down for the interview, made sure I had a lot of time so I could come there in time, relax a little bit, and don't have to stress, so I don't have to end up sweaty before the interview. So I arrive at Lund, the city where Ericsson Mobile Platforms had a headquarters. And I take the wrong turn and walk off in the wrong direction. After a while, I realized that I'm getting to the outskirts of the city. There's no Ericsson here. And I had to turn around and go back, and suddenly my time buffer has been shrinking. So now I had to pick up the pace. I arrive at Ericsson, a little bit sweaty, but I had 5 minutes before the interview. So I felt good. Now I had time. I announced myself in the reception, and I took a seat in a nice chair. And I read through the email once more about the developer position I had applied for, just to be certain that I haven't missed anything. And then I read, this is not a developer position, it's a testing position. Shit. So now I'm sitting there, I started to get a little bit sweaty. I'm wondering, what does a tester do? I had no idea. But I have 5 minutes to make up a story about why I'm great at testing, why I love testing, and why they should hire me, because I had a quite bad, non-interesting job at the moment. I really wanted to get away. But it worked. They bought it. I managed to fool them. And I like to refer to this as the best mistake I made in my professional career, because it turns out it's a really interesting subject and a really interesting field to work in. I get to work with some really interesting technology. I get to solve some really interesting problems, and I get to work with people. I really like the people aspect of engineering and software development. There are lots of different models. No model is perfect, but a lot of models can be useful in the right context. So this one is from the Heuristic Test Strategy Model. It's quite an easy one to understand, but it's one that's difficult to master. So, we basically have 3 legs. Product factors is the actual product, the functionality, the deliveries, what makes up what we actually sell. Project environment is, do we work in agile environment or agile-ish or waterfall? And what we'll be focusing in this talk is the quality criteria. What makes up for the quality? And based on all of this, we form the test techniques, and then we create the testing story. We have tested these things and not these, and these are the results to the best of our ability. This is what we know about the product. I've been working in a lot of different fields, in a lot of different organizations. I've built VLAN labs for Ericsson. I've done performance testing in different companies. I work with setting up requirement structures in Jira. I've been in exploratory testing. I've been working with test automation. And these last years, I've been transitioning more to lead roles. So these days, I'm a little bit more of a PowerPoint warrior, talking with organizations how to think about testing quality. While I often start with testing part, I often transition to work with developers because I need the testers to get testable code, that we can put the code in different states, so it's actually testable. And for the developers to understand what they need to do so they can write testable code, I also work with requirements. So we write requirements that the developers understand and that are testable. So these days I work all over the field, even though my current title is test manager. So there are a couple of patterns I've seen over the years. Some are things that are quite common for organizations. One of those things is very nicely framed by Gerald Weinberg, that is always a people problem. The technology we work with can be very complex, but it's always people developing the code. And it's always people that is to use the code or to be gain something from the code. And the other thing is that there is a big question that most organizations that I've seen often struggle with. And the big question is, what question do they need to ask? There are different definitions of testing. If I ask you what's the definition of test, would you be able to answer it? I got this question after working a couple of years in testing. I had no idea. But one of the best one, in my opinion, is by James Bach. Testing is questioning a product in order to evaluate it. Questioning, evaluation, thinking. But my favorite one, that's maybe not as elegant, came from Dawn Haynes. She gave her best tip to my software testing students. And she said that testing is an information service. And I really like that approach, to dig up the information, because we need to give information about the product to people who need to take decisions. They need to have good information, but they don't always know what questions to ask. And this is the challenge. And the first question that I always bring up, what is quality to you? What does quality mean for this company and this organization? And it's quite interesting to see that a lot of people haven't actually thought about what does it mean. My favorite definitions, again by Gerald Weinberg, quality is value to some person. And it is added on by James Bach and Michael Bolton, some person that matters. So in my current employer, my current client, I work as a consultant. I go around, I've been talking with a lot of development teams. I do a workshop about quality mindset, and we talk about these things because it's important to understand who matters for us and what is the value. And after a little bit of digging, people usually realize that it's not only the end customer that we're interested in. We also need, for example, maintainable code, so that we can make updates in a couple of years' time. And I've seen some disaster projects where it looked fine, But behind the scenes, we had developed basically a chaotic systems that we couldn't make any changes in because it would break. And we couldn't figure out where it would break because everything was connected. So the product owners were happy, but we couldn't add anything to the code. So I'm trying to avoid that situation with my clients. All right, so one way to divide quality into criteria, into different parts that matters for different people, is to use quality criteria. I really like the ones that are in the Heuristic Test Strategy Model, very nicely defined. You can also check out the old work by the Red Eye community. But when I talk with organizations, using an ISO seems to get people a little bit at ease. If it's an ISO, it must be good. Functional suitability is the obvious one. And what I found is that often organizations focus a little bit too much on this. They understand functionality, so that's where they're looking, that's where the testing happens. But we also have other things, such as compatibility. Not only if the PowerPoint or the website looks the same on Android and iPhone, it can also be the user management system. Do the customer use Active Directory, or do they use something else, so we don't get any surprises? Reliability, maintainability, performance efficiency, usability, security and portability. I believe they've made a change recently, so it looks a little bit different, but that's fine. I think this can be adapted a little bit depending on the needs of the organization. Currently, I'm focusing a lot on maintainability, so I'm working with teams, development teams right now, how they should write code that is easy to understand for people, that is maintainable, so we can make changes in the future. So maybe I will talk about this next year when we're done with our evaluation. Okay. So, I'm a consultant from a company called House of Test. My current client is Tetra Pak. And they make these milk cartons, for example, that you can find in different variations. And this is some really cool engineering. So into this machine, you basically have a roll of paper with text on, and you have a big jar of milk or water or something else that they want to have it. So they pull in this paper, cut it in the exact right place, fold it, put a little bit of adhesive on, shoots in the milk, and folds it together, again with a little bit of adhesive, and they tag the dates, or if it's going for a test or something like that. And the fast machines, which are not the fastest one, you have 11 of these every second. So you can imagine that these cuts needs to come at the right place all the time. If it's 1 millimeter off, it will only take 1 second before it's 1 centimeter off, and you have to stop the factory. So everything has to work perfectly all the time. You can make the math 11 per second, do that per minute, per hour, that's a lot of money. But now the transitioning, or the world is becoming bigger for them, because now they have to think about software in a different way. Because now we have tools where you can plan. For example, when you have want to do a quality check, and you want to plan so the 10 first one that's produced one day gets sent to the lab to check, so we know that there's no problem with the startup process. And all that data and all that test, everything needs to be connected. The software is run in the cloud. It's a new world. They basically have, how to say, a bingo with all the cool expressions today. So we have microservices running in Dockers that are deployed using Kubernetes. Really fun technology, but it's a mindset shift for the company, and that's where I'm there. So when I came in, they had the test cases in Word and the test reporting in PowerPoint. Today, it looks different. You will see just a little bit about that. But the challenge was, what have we tested? What are the results? What haven't we tested? But also helping the organization to ask the right questions. So the first the first page or the first report I saw where they tried to measure how good teams were at developing with quality. They were counting bugs during development. So there was one team that had a lot more bugs than the other teams. And of course I pointed, this must be the best team because they're really good at testing. Because the best way to not find any bugs was to not do any testing at all, right? Okay, so getting down a little bit to the practicalities. So no affiliation. These were the tools I had to work with. Azure DevOps was very handy because it has a test section, and since the teams are already using Azure DevOps, I can be close to the code. Power BI, unfortunately, was the option there. I would recommend using ClickSense instead. If you want to use business intelligence tool, it has nothing to do with me being the test coordinator for ClickSense once upon a time. Power BI is a little bit like a squeaky bicycle, and ClickSense is a rocket that sends up satellites to space. That's the difference, in my opinion. The bugs that Microsoft lets through, I'm personally offended when I use this at times. But never mind, moving on. This is similar to what you can do in different programs like Jira, for example. And I just want to show this a little bit quickly to show that there's possibilities. If you have already worked with this, then you already know this. It's quite easy to add data information into different work items in Azure DevOps. And it's quite simple as well into Jira or similar. So in this one, we have test case, and we have the quality characteristics here. So we have a little bit different levels of teams. So this is from the kind of system test team. So when they create a test case, they also say if this targets functionality or usability and so on. I did the same for our test sessions that we're going to use for exploratory testing or session-based test management, if applicable, of course. And then for the bugs, the same thing. And working with the developers or the people working with test automation, it's quite easy to do this in the code as well. Unfortunately, I couldn't see this through because I was moved to a different part of the organization. But I wanted to show that this is quite easy to add these things, so you have this information for every test case that is run. Okay. So once we have the data inside Azure DevOps, already in Azure DevOps there are some tools. So this is a dashboard from one of the development teams, and here we can see the number of test cases. And I think that the test cases are divided as well. The colors are actually parts of the product, so the team can dig in a little bit. And as you can see, we have 3 of the quality criteria covered, and the rest is not covered. And I just want to highlight usability right now, because I'm going to talk about it in a couple of slides. It's about creating the testing story. And I know I talk a lot about test cases at the moment. The balance between test cases and other types of testing, exploratory testing, is not the best yet, but there are some reasons behind it. So test cases are used as an example in this case. So now we have the data in Azure DevOps, and we can create small dashboards, but it's quite easy as well to extract it. If you haven't already seen this, there are some very nice APIs. So using this example, this call, I just have to enter the organization, of course, and the project, and the test plan, and the IDs. And then I just paste it into the browser, and then I get a JSON file that looks something like this with all the results. So it's quite easy to extract that information. And now we extract information, now we can start doing some interesting data digging. So just a little bit quickly about business intelligence tools. Basically 3 legs. You have the data, can be Excel, APIs, websites, or something else. And then you model the data, so you can connect data. So in this case, we have one data set with information about the test cases and one data set about the test results. And they actually have different names of the work item ID. But in the model, I can connect them. So now I can start to build a bigger model with lots of different information that is connected that I can start digging into and visualize. So data, the model, and the visualization. This is the typical for business intelligence tools. And this is how it looks like, the results. So we can see that we have a lot of test cases on functional suitability. There's some blanks, which means I need to hunt down the testers to actually update this information. A little bit about reliability and performance efficiency. This exact data doesn't matter. All data from the project are a little bit obfuscated. But the important thing is when I show this to stakeholders, now suddenly they can see something. Why is it missing over here? Why don't we do any testing? Now we can start to build the test story. Maintainability. We cover it with our tools. We do code reviews, for example. So not test cases, but we're handling it. Usability. In this particular test project, we don't care about usability. It's the responsibility of the team, as you saw a couple of slides ago. So now we can start explaining as well what is actually done where, and potentially also spot where we have something that is missing. So by seeing this image, it's not only 211 test cases and X number of those passed, failed, and executed or whatever. They can actually see from quality point of view, where do we have coverage and where do we don't have? Because in my opinion, it's equally important to know what you haven't tested as what you have tested. So you don't miss something that is important for the business value. In the end, it's always about the business value. Unless you're working with open source or something else. And here we can see the same for the issues. Where do we actually find the issues? And here we can see that, yeah, we don't have any issues on portability. That's because we don't do any testing on it. You can see the correlation here. So the absence of bugs is suddenly not an indicator that it's a good quality, because we can see why it's absence as well. And I had a fun question from my manager. He asked me, we don't have any test cases on usability. How can we find issues with usability? So I told him, well, we have testers that can think. They can actually report stuff that they see, even if it's not spelled out for them. So yeah, so this is one approach to help the organization to actually see what is going on and explain a little bit so we can have a good conversation about the test results. And this is important, to have the conversation. So they have a better way or an easy way to see what kind of questions they need to ask, and easier for me to explain as well when it's a little bit visual. I can also say when it comes to business intelligence tool, the difference between what you see here and do it in Excel is that in this case I can also, for example, click on the severity, critical severity bugs for functional scalability, and immediately get a list with who had done the testing and what parts of the product were affected. And then I can sort by year, for example, so I can see what is found this year and the next year. So you can dig down into the data. If you don't need it to dig through the data, there are other options. One of the things we are doing right now, or my colleague set up in his project, he doesn't need the data digging, he only needs a situation report right now, so he set up a pipeline. Thanks to having the data in Azure DevOps, he can run the pipeline, it extracts the data, creates static images that you cannot do anything with, but automatically create a test report with the date. This is the current status, so he can use it in his reporting. We're also going to look a little bit in the future at Grafana, some alternatives perhaps, because Power BI is very good by what it does, not necessarily what we're going to need in the future. The important thing also is that we get the data, that we have what is important for us, that we cover the quality characteristics. Because in the future, we're probably going to have some AI for doing analysis, and then we need to have the data in place. I was a little bit sweaty when I realized after the call for paper closed to Nordic Testing Days that the abstract I sent didn't have AI mentioned anywhere. So I was certain I wouldn't get in, but here I am. So, in summary, so I've helped the organization to visualize a little bit the quality from one viewpoint and help them to actually ask better questions. And I want to highlight that it's not that difficult. The business intelligence tool takes a little bit of learning, but a lot of stuff you have already in Azure DevOps and Jira, accessible by APIs. You can extract it, set up a graph in Excel if you like. But there are good tools today that can help if you know what you're looking for. And with that, stay connected. I unfortunately need to leave already just after 2 o'clock today, so if you don't have time to talk with me during the lunch, please connect, ask questions. I'm always glad to chat with people. And now I'm open for questions.
Any hands up anywhere? Thought I saw someone. Ah, there we go.
Thanks for the talk. Do you also track automated versus manual test cases in your reports, and is it an important metric for the management?
It's not an important metric for them because they don't know what to measure exactly. What's important is to have an understanding. So we have a decent conversation in the organization. These test cases, I forgot to mention it. So the data you saw is actually the manual test cases that are manually executed. So I haven't had the opportunity to get the test automation into place yet, but we already have that in the pipelines. So the information is available, it's just not gathered in one place. But there is the intention is that we will, in the same structure we saw, to gather the manual test cases, the automated checks, and the exploratory testing sessions. So we can build up a more colorful story for management.
Thank you. I was thinking, if you hadn't made a mistake and become a tester, do you think you would still be a developer or someone else?
I don't know. Difficult to say. I have no idea. Sometimes life is just pinball. You try to hit something and end up somewhere else. I probably would be like in the same area of technology because I think it's really fun, the stuff I work with. But if that would have been developer, I start developer, transition to test, I'm not sure.
All the questions happening on this side now.
Thank you for presentation. So when I check your report, I can see that, okay, we have functional tests. How can I see that which features are covered by your functional? Do you use any framework yourself, or do you use any label while writing your test scenarios?
Yeah, we have more data behind this that is not visible in this one. So these slides are from one report, and I have 15 slides or something like that, between 15 and 20. So I can see trends, for example, when we find bugs. And I can also dig into. So if I click and say that, let's see, all of those that are failed, for example. If I click on this, right click, I can go to a page where I have more information, and there we can actually also sort by what part of the product. So right now we are manually adding the different areas of the product. So just as with quality characteristics, they're also adding which part of the functionality they're working with. And this can be structured in different ways. So different projects, you can do it in multiple ways. But we have a drop-down, so we can sort. So it's very easy for me to dig into the data and see what testing is done on which part of the product. But it's not visible in this slide.
Okay, thank you. Suppose time for presents and time to wrap up. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Nice to be here again.